Thank you. Good evening, I'm Bernard Schwartz, the director of the 92nd Street Wise Unterberg Poetry Center, and it's my privilege to welcome you to tonight's tribute. Mary Oliver read from this stage a number of times over the years, and it's an honor to be able to celebrate her life and work with all of you. Our participants, whose order of presentation is listed in your printed programs, have each chosen to share poems of deep personal meaning. But before the readings begin, I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, the Academy of American Poets, Penguin Press, and the Poetry Society of America for their generous support, which enabled us to make tonight's tribute a free event. I also want to thank the estate of Mary Oliver for trusting the Y with such a special gathering. And here now to say a few words is the literary executor of the Oliver estate, Bill Rishblom.
Good evening. For those of you here and those of you watching online, thank you so much for being part of this Mary Oliver celebration. It's your presence that makes this a remarkable event for, frankly, a remarkable person. I want to thank Bernard and his colleagues here at the Y, along with the other sponsors, for hosting us here. Mary, who was so gentle in person, was fierce about her work. She was fiercely disciplined and fiercely attentive to how it was presented. There's some people in the audience tonight who have been behind this work in terms of how it's presented, and I just wanted to acknowledge Ann Gata from Penguin Press, Helene Atwan from Beacon Press, and Charlotte Sheedy and her team from the Sheedy Agency. Thank you all so much. Mary had a skill to attract remarkable people into her orbit. One of those people was a woman who helped take care of Mary down in Florida as Mary became very ill. And this woman helped Mary in so many ways. She's here tonight, and I just wanted her to stand so we can acknowledge Trish Spotto. Trish. And as long as we're doing incredible people, those of you who know Mary's books know her most recent books have been dedicated to one person, and that person is also here tonight from Florida, and that's Ann Taylor. Ann, would you stand? Mary and I spoke about what would happen after she passed, and I know this probably doesn't surprise you, she had no interest in a somber funeral. She did look forward to a celebration, if it could be a celebration for both her work and for you, her readers. Now, these kinds of events have been taking place all across the country since January. Tonight is certainly the largest event, and in many ways, we have some incredibly special readers that you'll hear from in a moment. But before we do, I just wanted to say a few words about Mary as a person and as a member of our family. Mary, I think, was one of the few artists who what you read in her work was who she was. She was full of compassion, wonder, and love. In fact, Mary loved love. For Emily and I, for our children, Noah and Clarissa, she modeled a way to engage the world, not to demand, but to ask. Not to be all-knowing, but to be always curious. And not to wallow in the past or be focused on the future, but to be present. She looked at everyone the way she looked at nature, to see us as we are and to discover the spirit inside of us. And then Mary would smile, and that smile was a force all on its own. Of course, it would not be a Mary Oliver event if we didn't talk about dogs. Those of you who love dogs will understand when I say that Mary could make dogs smile. But actually, it was more than that, because Mary could make dogs laugh. I kid you not, I have seen Mary and her dogs, Mary and our dogs, they would just be laughing together. And that laughter was just pure happiness. And when I think of Mary, I think of that pure happiness. Many, many years ago, Mary and she met a group of new literature faculty colleagues. And one of them, in a very condescending way, said to her, "So how do you plan to teach our students how to write?" Mary, without missing a beat, and totally ignoring the somewhat arch tone of the faculty member, said, "Oh, I can't teach them how to write, but I can help them learn how to rewrite." And I think that this is Mary's great legacy to all of us, how to live more fully by helping us rewrite our relationship to the world and to each other. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to introduce the first person up, who is an amazing writer, a young writer. Lindsay spent tremendous amount of time with Mary, interviewing her, and is now deep in the archives, working through all of Mary's things. And I am sure she's in the process of writing what will be the definitive biography of Mary Oliver. Please welcome Lindsay Whalen.
Wow. Thank you, Bill, Bernard, and everyone who made tonight possible. It is an incredible honor to be in this room with everyone celebrating Mary Oliver. And there are so many of you. I want to talk a little bit tonight about devotion, about love and attention, and how Mary Oliver relied on their guidance to navigate the twisted maze that is our time on this earth. Mary's life was rich with beginnings, and none was more important than her arrival in Provincetown in the summer of 1964. She was 28 years old, and she had recently published her first collection to little notice. This was a time of searching, of movement, and she came to Provincetown not knowing where she would go next or how long she would stay. But when summer turned to fall, she did not leave, and for the next 50 years, she called Provincetown home. The life of devotion that Mary had entered into as a child, with her discovery of poetry and the natural world, found its arena of practice in Provincetown. As she had once studied the wild of her Ohio past, she came to know the tides, the beech forest, the cries of seabirds. She greeted 1,000 mornings, and she walked 1,000 miles, and she drank almost daily from Blackwater Pond, water that was, as she would write, flavored with oak leaves, and also, no doubt, the feet of ducks. Out of that great steadiness of habit came change. Change in landscape, in language, in spirit. In the summer of 1979, 15 years after her arrival in Provincetown, Mary published her third collection, 12 Moons. It was, she would say, the first time I was doing what I want to do. Here was her voice, and it was heard. When the poet James Wright received 12 Moons, he read a favorite poem out loud to his wife, and when he finished, he said, "Mary Oliver, that's Mary Oliver." This was years before her name was known to many, years before she would command a room like the one we're in tonight. Mary's readings then were rare and often close to home. But in the fall of 1979, she traveled to Pittsburgh to read alongside New Yorker poetry editor Howard Moss. She was 44 years old, and it was just the beginning. As she stepped up to the microphone that night, she said, "I'm going to start with a short poem so that you can get a little used to my voice, and I can get used to this." The poem she chose to begin with that night had not yet been published. It would be a poem she returned to, a poem she once called my poem. And in 2017, it would find its place on the back cover of Devotions, her lifetime selected volume. It is, for me, a testament to what devotion offers to everyone. A chance to change, to live, to step into the wide space of eternity. And now we will hear Mary Oliver in 1979 reading At Blackwater Pond.
At Blackwater Pond, the tossed waters have settled after a night of rain. I dip my cupped hands. I drink a long time. It tastes like stone, leaves, fire. It falls cold into my body, waking the bones. I hear them deep inside me whispering, "Oh, what is that beautiful thing that just happened?"
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Now, what a wonderful way to celebrate Mary Oliver, her life, her poetry, the way that she affected each and every one of us who is here tonight, and so many millions more. I'm going to read 3 poems that I could have chosen 30 or 100, but I was told I couldn't be out here that long, so I'm going to read 3 that have a lot of meaning to me and were favorites of my late mother, who actually introduced me first to the works of Mary Oliver. The first is, "Don't hesitate." If you suddenly and unexpectedly feel joy, don't hesitate. Give in to it. There are plenty of lives and whole towns destroyed or about to be. We are not wise and not very often kind, and much can never be redeemed. Still, life has some possibility left. Perhaps this is its way of fighting back, that sometimes something happens better than all the riches or power in the world. It could be anything, but very likely you notice it in the instant when love begins. Anyway, that's often the case. Anyway, whatever it is, don't be afraid of its plenty. Joy is not made to be a crumb. The second is especially suited for the times in which we live. It's called I Worried. I worried a lot. Will the garden grow? Will the rivers flow in the right direction? Will the earth turn as it was taught? And if not, How shall I correct it? Was I right? Was I wrong? Will I be forgiven? Can I do better? Will I ever be able to sing? Even the sparrows can do it, and I am, well, hopeless. Is my eyesight fading, or am I just imagining it? Am I going to get rheumatism, lockjaw, dementia? Finally, I saw that worrying had come to nothing and gave it up and took my old body and went out into the morning and sang. And finally, the poem that I read at my mother's memorial service, because I could think of very few things that she would have appreciated more. When death comes. When death comes, like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measles pox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore, I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does toward silence, and each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. Thank you.
I just want to begin by thanking Trish and Anne. Trish, I can't see you. I've never met you, but I've spoken to you I don't know how many times on the phone. And I just want to honor the work of a caregiver and a caretaker and someone who cares for another human being when they're sick. And it is incredible, heroic work. So wherever you are, I want to thank you. And I want to say hi to Anne. I would like to meet you, though, because I just heard your voice on the phone. But I just want to begin by saying that I'm so gratified to be here this evening because I feel that Mary is here. I was so glad to hear her voice just moments ago because the truth is I've missed her so much since she went and took that extra long walk into the woods. Mary was one of my heroes, and I'm sure for many of you, you feel exactly the same way. And although she didn't know it, we were intimate friends before we ever met. How could you read her words and not feel like she was speaking directly to you, directly to your heart, to your experiences? Lucky for me, she went on to become one of my dearest friends and one of my most trusted confidants. Mary inspired me. She moved me. She made me question everything that I had been taught, everything I had been told, and everything I thought I believed. She turned me inside out, doing it in the gentlest way possible. She also helped me to feel my feelings, to honor my feelings, and to talk about them. And for me, that was a game changer. Here's how I first met Mary. When I was First Lady in California, I kept trying to get her to come and speak at this women's conference that I was doing. Every time I would call her, she would say, no. I kept at it, and she just didn't care about anything I was saying. I said to her, look at, the journey just upended my life. It's the most incredible thing I ever read. My life has never been the same. And she was like, so? I was like, but you don't understand. She goes, oh, yes, I do. No. I said, but you got to understand, this is like the biggest women's conference. There's going to be 30,000 women there, and I know they've all read the journey, and they'll be moved by you. No, Maria, no. I was like, but Mary, you can sell so many books. I guarantee you'll sell 30,000 books. She said, I don't care. No. It just went on and on and on. So I continued to stalk her, harass her, call her, leave messages for her, until finally in 2010 she gave in to me. I don't know if it was she took pity on me or she just wanted to get me to stop calling her. But she came and she spoke to that room of 30,000 women, and it was nothing short of spectacular. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. And she took the entire room on a journey, and everybody was weeping. It was spectacular. So our relationship began in rejection, but it ended in total acceptance and in total love. Over the years, Mary and I spoke about everything, about life, about love, about loss. We talked about finding our way and holding our ground. I learned a lot about the power of no from her, and I learned a lot about following your heart from her as well. I was thrilled when she explained to me, Maria, we're both reporters. I didn't know what she was talking about, but I went with it because I was so excited. She encouraged me to pursue writing poetry myself, and I encouraged her to live until it, just became incredibly too difficult. As everybody in this room knows, I know, Mary was unique, an original in every sense of that word, which in my mind is one of anybody's greatest accomplishments. She was loving, she was fun, and whipper smart. She saw the world in her own beautiful way, and she was generous enough to bring us all along on her journey, helping us to see what she saw, helping us to feel what she felt. That's why I will never walk in nature again without thinking about her. I will never look at a bird or a butterfly or a flower or a grasshopper without thinking what she would think of them, what she would write about them. In fact, before Mary, I never thought about a grasshopper ever. Never looked at one, gave it any time, and now every time I see a grasshopper or a butterfly or anything that I used to just walk by, I stop and take it in and remember her words about things like that. In helping put words to my emotions, Mary also helped me, and I know so many in this room, that not only are you okay, but that you can do whatever you want. More than anything, I think she gave so many people, and me in particular, permission to be who I am today and who I will be tomorrow. Because of Mary, I will never, ever doubt the right to carve out my own path. I will never doubt the right to pursue my own journey. I will never doubt the right to live my one wild and precious life. And today, there is no doubt in my mind that Mary is still out there, walking, notebook in hand, stopping, observing it all from her unique point of view. I'd love to think about what she'd be writing about this gathering. I can't imagine. Oh, yes, I can. So I say to Mary Oliver, wherever you are, and you are everywhere, I love you. And I know everybody here probably can feel the same thing. and I carry her with me wherever I go. When I'm doubting my journey, when I'm wondering if I'm entitled to live out and free, when I'm looking, as I said, at nature, I always think of her. She dazzled me, and I'm sure she dazzled all of you. And most important, she lived her one wild and precious life in such a unique and original way, which is what I admire, and I'm sure it's what the millions and millions of people who read her words and have taken her words as a path forward in their own life think about all the time. And so I was gracious, and they gave me the ability to read The Summer Day. I said, I want to read The Journey. They're like, Eve Ensler owns The Journey. I was like, okay, all right. She can have The Journey, because there's, as Hillary said, there's so many poems that we can all read. But I would like to tell you at another time about my experience with The Journey, which I won't do tonight, but I will talk about my other second favorite one, but one. It's... Eve was like, I didn't own The Journey. I was like, yes, you did. They told me I couldn't even go near The Journey. But anyway, she'll do a beautiful job. This is The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her emotions and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it that you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Thank you.
This is Mary's poem called The Egret. Every time but one, the little fish and the green and spotted frogs know the egret's bamboo legs from the thin and polished reeds at the edge of the silky world of water. Then, in their last inch of time, they are for an instant the white froth of her shoulders and the white scrolls of her belly and the white flame of her head. What more can you say about such wild swimmers? They were here. They were silent. They're gone, having tasted sure terror. Therefore, I have invented words with which to stand back on the weedy shore, with which to say, look, look, what is this dark death that opens like a white door? Yeah. This is a poem that by a poet that Mary loved and that I do too. This Jalaluddin Rumi. On the day I die, when I am being carried toward the grave, don't weep. Don't say she's gone. She's gone. Death has nothing to do with going away. The sun sets and the moon sets, but they're not gone. Death is a coming together. The tomb looks like a prison, but it's really release into union. The human seed goes down in the ground like a bucket into the well where Joseph is. It grows and comes up full of some unimagined beauty. Your mouth closes here and immediately opens with a shout of joy there. This poem is entitled Magellan. Like Magellan, let us find our islands to die in, far from home, from anywhere familiar. Let us risk the wild places. Let us go down, lest we go down in comfort and despair. For years, we have labored over common roads, dreaming of ships that sail into the night. Let us be heroes. Or if that's not in us, let us find men to follow, honor bright. For what is life but reaching for an answer? And what is death but a refusal to grow? Magellan had a dream he had to follow. The sea was big, his ships were awkward, slow. And when the fever would not set him free, to his thin crew, sail on, he cried. And so they did. Carried the frail dream homeward, and thus Magellan lives, although he died.
Are you going to sit right there? And then we'll bring that picture. Who is that guy? My sister's sitting in the front row. She was terribly worried about what I was going to wear. And crossing my legs, which I rarely do, I just realized how much my socks clashed with my shoes. But I think I'm the only person in the room, because Trish, you didn't bring yours. Anne? We all took a pair of Mary's socks when she died. So I'm wearing Mary Oliver's socks, which is why I'm so terrifically overconfident up here at the podium. So I met Coleman 12 years ago, and shortly after we met, I was running a writing series on the small island where I lived called Block Island. And Coleman said, well, why haven't you had Mary Oliver to your series? You're like practically little Mary. And I said, well, Mary Oliver's a recluse and she costs $15,000. And he said, and she's my friend, let's go see her. So we did. And then it wasn't really about poetry at all. It was really about friendship. So I have had the great gift in my life these last 12 years to be Mary's friend. Anne, I kind of know where you're sitting. Yeah. So about a year ago, 13 months, it was last August, I went down to Hobe Sound where Mary finished her life. And the last few years of her life, it's no secret, they weren't easy. You know, she was sick, and she was battling many illnesses, and the mind was going, which was way worse for her than the body going. But 13 months ago, I went to visit, and when I arrived, she was feisty. She was wound up. Tricia was like, she's ready to talk to you, kid. And Mary had a line from one of her poems in her head, and she had half of the line in her brain, and she couldn't remember the poem. And Tricia had spent like 2 months trying to find the poem by Googling it. And what Mary remembered was, what she remembered of the poem that had come to her in a dream was, if the world were only blank and blank, who would want it? And we couldn't find it on Google. And so about, I don't know, 10 hours and 3 glasses of wine into it, I said, well, what did we do before Google, Mary? Where are all your books? And I went around the house and I found all of her books, and we read through them, poem by poem, quietly, in a side room at Marty and Ann's house. And we couldn't find the poem. And I always travel with one of Mary's books. This was given to me in 2001 by the first fairy godmother that I have. And I said, well, Mary, I've got your new one selected in my backpack. How about if you look through that? And I tossed her the book, and I swam, and she read through her poems with familiarity and astonishment. I mean, I do really feel like, because those of you who knew her, and you didn't need to know her personally, there was no ego. And she was almost astonished, page by page, reading these poems that she'd written. So I tossed her this book, she thumbed through it, and she said, aha. And for those of you who know her, she said that a lot, aha. I knew it was you people in the kitchen making noise. And the poem's called Singapore, and it was one of her poems that I had overlooked because of the summer day and wild geese. I mean, how many greatest hits can you have? Not enough. Singapore. In Singapore, in the airport, a darkness was ripped from my eyes. In the women's restroom, one compartment stood open. A woman knelt there, washing something in the white bowl. Disgust argued in my stomach, and I felt in my pocket for my ticket. A poem should always have birds in it. Kingfishers say with their bold eyes and gaudy wings. Rivers are pleasant, and of course trees, a waterfall, or if that's not possible, a fountain rising and falling. A person wants to stand in a happy place in a poem. When the woman turned, I could not answer her face. Her beauty and her embarrassment struggled together, and neither could win. She smiled, and I smiled. What kind of nonsense is this? Everybody needs a job. Yes, a person wants to stand in a happy place in a poem, but first we must watch her as she stares down at her labor, which is dull enough. She is washing the top of the airport ashtrays as big as hubcaps with a blue rag. Her small hands turn the metal, scrubbing and rinsing. She does not work slowly nor quickly, but like a river. Her dark hair is like the wing of a bird. I don't doubt for a moment that she loves her life. And I want her to rise up from the crust and the slop and fly down to the river. This probably won't happen, but maybe it will. If the world were only pain and logic, who would want it? Of course it isn't. Neither do I mean anything miraculous, but only the light that can shine out of a life. I mean the way she unfolded and refolded the blue cloth, the way her smile was only for my sake. I mean the way this poem is filled with trees and birds. She's so dangerous. Stop it. So Mary came to Block Island once for the poetry project that I ran. It was the 5th anniversary. And she read at the Catholic Church, and we filled the place. There were like 500 people there, which is remarkable because only 900 people live on Block Island, and most of them hate poetry. So the ferries were really busy that weekend. And she read at the Catholic Church, and believe it or not, Father Joe's a rule guy. Imagine that in the Catholic Church, a guy who's all about rules, bad rules. And one of them was no dogs allowed. And at the time, I've had 3 amazing dogs in my life, but at the time it was Brother. And Brother was a better human than any of us will ever be. But he wasn't allowed in the church. So Maria was just talking about how Mary could have her stage presence. Mary got halfway through the reading, and she looked up and around, and she said, "Oh, I know you people. You probably want to hear wild geese." And everybody started stomping and shouting, and she said, "But how can I possibly go on reading while Brother is outside of the church?" And so we all started chanting Brother's name, and Father Joe said, "All right, just let him in." And so Brother ran in, and he did a lap around the pews, and then he looked right at Mary, and he laid down at her feet, and the reading went on. And when Brother died, Mary and Anne said, "You have to come. We'll take care of you." So I flew down here, and I was to Florida, and I was a mess, and I cried, and I tried to tell them how he was the most special dog in the world and all of that. And then the day that it was time for me to fly home, Mary said, "When you're ready, I want you to read that poem, The First Time Percy Came Back." And I said, "Mary, I've read that poem a few dozen times. I know it by heart. I love it." And she said, "Well, read it again." And so I did. And this is a poem that Mary was very proud of. She wasn't proud of a lot of what she did, but she thought this poem got a little bit overlooked because it was just like another great Mary Oliver dog poem. And there's one line in the poem that she was so thrilled with that she kept mentioning it to me. "Did you read Percy? You know that line about the music? Wasn't it good?" So here's the first time Percy came back. The first time Percy came back, he was not sailing on a cloud. He was loping along with sand as though he had come a great way. "Percy," I cried out and reached to him those white curls, but he was unreachable. As music is present, yet you can't touch it. "Yes, it's all different," he said. "You're going to be very surprised." But I wasn't thinking of that. I only wanted to hold him. "Listen," he said, "I miss that too. And now you'll be telling stories of my coming back, and they won't be false, and they won't be true, but they'll be real." And then, as he used to, he said, "Let's go." And we walked down the beach together. I'm gonna, please don't. I'm like Eddie Murphy up here, his mother's shoe. Don't. I'm going to break stride here just a little bit and read a poem about Mary rather than one of hers. This poem was written during one of the tough cycles, and there were many of them. And it was just one of those nights where I was wondering, how much more does she have to go through? So this is called Snow in a Florida Breeze. I don't know if Mary is as ready to die as Coleman is, or at least sometimes says he is. But if she is, this might be the time. A little more bird song at sunrise, that final sip of coffee, a week or so of morphine, then the smooth and always too fast sleigh ride downhill. Snow and a Florida breeze, and the swift re-entry into the light she never left despite the many darks that tried to take it. I do know that when she comes back, she will be riding on a cloud that looks like Percy, and I will run down the beach in the way I thought I'd forgotten. Faster and faster and faster, until, at last, I catch up with her again. And I will finish with one of her poems. It comes from Redbird. So for those of you who don't have the book, go get it. And not through Amazon, right? Your independent bookstore can find the book. You can wait 2 weeks. I'm so political. But one of the things, you know, when she died, the great thing about death is that you pay attention to things. So I was pouring through her books with hunger. You know, like I can't believe all that time with her, and I didn't even know these poems. So on this amazing book, Redbird, there's no red bird on the cover. Kind of sneaky, huh? In the poetry world, they call that a metaphor. This is the last book, the last poem in the book, Redbird. Mary titled it Redbird Explains Himself. I'm taking a tiny bit of poetic license tonight, changing 2 letters, and I'm going to call it Redbird Explains Herself. Yes, I was the brilliance floating over the snow. And yes, I was the song in the summer leaves, but this was only the first trick I had hold of among my other mythologies. For I also knew obedience, bringing sticks to the nest, food to the young, kisses for my bride. But don't stop there. Stay with me. Listen. If I was the song that entered your heart, then I was the music of your heart that you wanted and needed. And thus, wilderness bloomed there with all of its followers, gardeners, lovers, people who weep for the death of rivers. And this was my true task, to be the body, to be the music of the body. Do you understand? For truly the body needs a song, a spirit, a soul, and no less to make this work. The soul has need of a body. And I am both of the earth and of the inexplicable beauty of heaven, where I fly so easily, so welcome. Yes. And this is why I have been sent, to teach this to your heart. So if you are going to applaud for me, this would be the time, and I would suggest you all stand up because we're going to finish this set with a song for your heart. For the last year and a half, Coleman, for whatever reason, has taken such pleasure in singing this song as loud as he can and in public places. And he would sing it to Mary. And in her final week, when we were with her and she was in a coma, we would put Coleman on speakerphone and he would sing this song to her and we would sing along. So I'm asking you all, you'll recognize it, you'll know a few of the words. If it helps to stand up, it doesn't matter. Coleman's gonna sing you all a song and you better sing along. And highest praise for our beautiful friend, Mary Oliver. You ready?
Say, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me? Hey, say, sweet baby, don't you think maybe we could find a brand new recipe? I got a hot rod Ford and a $2 bill. I know a spot right over the hill. Soda pop and the dancing's free. If you want to have fun and come along with me singing, hey, good looking, what you got cooking? How's about cooking something up with me?
Good evening, everyone. It is such an honor to be here, and I only hope that my words do justice to astonishing Mary. Mary and I came from similar darkness. She went to the woods, to the trees, the black ducks, mallards and streams, cattails, herons, and gulls. I went to the city and the bars. She brought me outside. Later, I invited her inside. We were sisters, artists laying seeds and tracks for each other's survival. Almost 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3/4 uterine cancer. The night before the surgery, my friends gathered in my hospital room. My friend Kim, who had memorized about 1,000 poems and spoke them anywhere and everywhere like iambic Tourette's, asked me, "What is your intention?" I thought, surviving? But what I said is I would really like to do this without fear. Then she flashed her mighty poetry deck and said, "Pick one." Out of a sea of turquoise cards, I picked The Journey. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, though the whole house began to tremble and you felt the old tug at your ankles. "Mend my life," each voice cried. But you didn't stop. You knew what you had to do, though the wind pried with its stiff fingers at the very foundations, though their melancholy was terrible. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. After 9 months of Mary setting me off on that journey, after 9 months of cancer treatment, I emerged as in a body dream and found myself speaking at Maria Shriver's conference. In front of thousands of people, I was weak, thin, bald, vulnerable, like a walking embryo. There I talked about being pricked and cut, invaded and opened. I talked about cancer and what had been burned away in the Kali fire of chemo, the violence and sexual abuse of my father, the betrayal of my mother, and how for the first time I had a body and was in my body, and how I fell in love with a tree. Shaking, I walked off stage, and to my great surprise, there was Mary Oliver, weeping in my arms, thanking me for speaking a truth she needed to hear, which she told me later burst open her own story. Mary, I miss you. I wish you could visit. I live in the woods now with my dog Pablo and the heron who eats my precious koi. and the foxes and bears and deer and snapping turtles and mother willow whose limbs I read each day a living poem. In many ways, you led me here. Your words, your seeing. Was it the catbird or the song of the meadowlark, or a frog in her shining green skin? The snake looped and solitary in high grass, the beech trees, pine, honey, locust, or black oaks, 4 speckled eggs, or the heron who wishes he could sing but croaks, the affable daisy, the pond lily, the dead loon, and the dead gray foxes in the road. The almost unhearable sound of roses singing, the sunflower turning to the sun all day, every day, more precious than gold. These words, your words, made me so rich. So I was thinking, dear Mary, what could I give you in return? I think of all the things you called us to. What was most central to your oeuvre and life was enthusiasm, attention, constancy, worship, devotion. That's what you imbued through your craft and words into all of us, devotion. So in that spirit, to you, Mary, for you, Mary, tonight I am making a solemn promise that for all my remaining days, I will give myself in pure devotion to our Mother Earth. First, to cleanse your reputation, our Mother, fouled by those who, overwhelmed by their awe, rather than humbling themselves to your genius and power, they in their weakness designed a parallel world where they would be dominant and above. They sullied your name and turned us humans against you, teaching us we were separate because you were merciless and cruel. They convinced us we needed them to protect us from you. But our Mother was always meant to be wild, for how else do seeds fly? And like you, Mary, she was never meant to be tamed, dominated, exploited, or harmed. She who gave us paradise and waits with tumultuous yearning that we will awaken now before the final hour. In your name, Mary, I will devote myself to her, to listen, to see, to cherish, to serve, to protect, to worship, to be her, to be her. Will you? Will you do this for our seer, for our poet, for our Mary?
Thank you. I'm John Waters. I'm not sure why they saved me to last. but here goes. I'm going to start by reading To Be Human is to Sing Your Own Song, which is from Blue Horse's 2014. Everything I can think of that my parents thought or did, I don't think and I don't do. I opened windows, they shut them. I pulled open the curtains, they shut them, if you get my drift. Of course, there were some similarities. They wanted to be happy, and they weren't. I wanted to be Shelley, and I wasn't. I don't mean I didn't have to avoid imitation. The gloom was pretty heavy. But then for me, there was the forest, where they didn't exist, and the fields, where I learned about birds and other sweet tidbits of existence. The song sparrow, for example. In the song sparrow's nest, the nestlings, those who would sing eventually, must listen carefully to the father bird as he sings and makes their own song in imitation of his. I don't know if any other bird does this in nature's way, has to do this, but I know a child doesn't have to. Doesn't have to. Doesn't have to, and I didn't. Mary Oliver sure didn't. I first met Mary in 1965 in Provincetown when I applied for a job at her girlfriend Molly Malone Cook's bookshop. Mary was quite different then, less self-assured, moping around in the storeroom in a pea coat despite 80-degree weather. Was she depressed or angry? I didn't know. I was scared of her. But poetry sure came to her rescue. No Voyage had just been released, and her career was about to blast off. Think about it. Not many poets' careers blast off. But hers sure did. I was lucky enough to watch it grow from the beginning, proud to be Molly and Mary's friend and be invited to be included in their celebrations. Mary won the Pulitzer, the National Book Award, so deserving and so exciting. But Mary was not exactly who many of you think she was. She was no Earth Mother dancing through the woods in slow motion like a deodorant commercial. No, she could be a drama queen. She loved to feud. God knows she never suffered fools and was way beyond opinionated. I love that Mary, the contrary one, the angry but loving brainiac, the one that only nature could soothe. Well, sort of soothe. This poem is How I Go to the Woods from Swan, 2010. Ordinarily, I go to the woods alone, with not a single friend, for they are all smilers and talkers and therefore unsuitable. I don't really want to be witnessed talking to the catbirds or hugging the old black oak tree. I have my way of praying, as you no doubt have yours. Besides, when I am alone, I can become invisible. I can sit on top of a dune as motionless as an uprise of weeds until the foxes run by unconcerned. I can hear the almost unhearable sound of the roses singing. If you have ever gone to the wood with me, I must love you very much. I never went to the woods with Mary Oliver. But I could kid her about it. If I see you crawling around Beach Forest alone talking to animals, I'm calling the mental institution. I never let her forget the time she was on her hands and knees in a stream helping a badger when it bit her. That's what you get, I told her. Nosing around some animal's home. Maybe it didn't want your help building a nest. She'd always laugh. Mary had a great sense of humor, especially about herself. I was maybe the only friend who told her the truth, and I'm going to get lynched for this one. That dog of hers was awful. Yapping, pissing all over the rugs, refusing to be house-trained. That little fucker bit her, too. Percy, stay, she'd yell when it would charge me at the door when I came over. Is that the same dog, I'd say, just to make her crazy? She'd laugh again. She didn't care. Mary understood defiance. I remember when she brought me to Sweetbriar College, where she taught for a while, to do my spoken word show, and worked in the word asshole into her introduction of me in front of her horrified poetry purists. Mary was a troublemaker, like all good writers. And oh yeah, she drank a lot too. Chain smoked a storm too, right up to the end, unabashedly, even with cancer. But Mary's maddening contrary lifestyle only added to the color of her personality. Who knows? Maybe it made her a better poet too, a star and a lifelong friend. I still miss Mary in Provincetown, seeing her walking on the beach at the crack of dawn every morning up from where I lived. I miss discussing her feuds and romances after Molly died through a cloud of smoke in her condo with a view. Mary Oliver was the real thing, a beautiful bohemian, a gay woman who didn't fit in her own minority, an unabashed eccentric who gave the word intellectual a new twist and helped me understand poetry. To paraphrase a favorite children's 1950s ditty, some of you may be embarrassed to remember. Mary Oliver was a poet. She did know it, and her feet, sure, were Longfellow's. And now, to end tonight's tribute, we'll hear a recording of Mary reading The Wild Geese from this stage in 2012.
wild geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese high in the clean blue air are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over announcing your place in the family of things.